Hi everyone, welcome to the Car Chat podcast. And with me today, I have Alex Ross. Hello.
Hello, how's it going, man?
Not bad, not bad. Now, Alex is joining us all the way over from the other side of the world. So it's evening for me and breakfast time for you. Can you tell the audience just a little bit about sort of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I run a Porsche modification, tuning shop in California. I'm originally from London, England, so my accent is muddled. I apologize. But yeah, what we do is take, an already, fabulous 911, mostly GT3, and soup it up some, and give it more engine performance, more suspension performance, more noise sometimes, a lot of times. And yeah, more power, more fun, basically. Just make them edgier.
Yeah. I think I first came across you, it was about the time I think I got my GT3. So it was 2013, something like that. And an exhaust went on my car, one of your exhausts, early days. And it's been on the car ever since. Still there, 8 years later.
Hopefully not annoying everybody around you.
No, I think it is, weirdly, I think this is like a getting older maybe, or being more aware of other people. It now appears louder to me than it did when I first fitted it. And you're I'm a bit more conscious.
Very, very normal thing. I when we first started playing with these cars, I started before I had a shop, but in like 2001 with a 996 turbo, those were notoriously quiet. They had the hairdryer turbos on there, muffling everything. So I think I tried about 23 different exhausts on that car total in the lifespan, and they got progressively louder and louder and louder. I think so. My hearing's probably messed up, but yeah, it went from a complete muffler to 5-inch straight pipes with flames out the back. And and since I've gotten older, that's been dialed back again.
I'm part of a Facebook group, like a Porsche owners group. I don't really know why, on Facebook. And a classic question that comes up, or someone will have just bought a 911 turbo and they'll say, how do I make my 911 turbos sound good? What exhaust? And some, so-and-so will be like, oh, buy a GT3.
No, you can make them sound better. I mean, we have stuff for those as well. And you can make them sound, less like a Hoover, if you will, or a Dyson, whatever they call them over here, vacuum cleaner. I think that's what they call them here. You can make them sound better, but they're never going to be like a GT3, naturally aspirated and revving like that. No.
It's a completely different sound, isn't it? I think often you get people trying to fit an exhaust and they go, oh yeah, but if you put the right exhaust on it, it will sound like this. It's like, no, it's just going to sound like a louder version of the engine.
That's very true. There's a lot of exhaust companies that try to change the sound or the tone and pitch and things like that. But generally speaking, you're basically cranking up the volume of what the car gives you. You know? And so if it's nothing against Subarus, but they're, the 4-banger turbos are not known for sounding fantastic. They sound like a little bit like somebody's lawnmower or Flymo or whatever they're called, or Concord. Well, what are those? I can't remember the brands you have over there anymore. I haven't been there in a while. So, but you just turn the volume up on that, and it's like, oh, somebody's cutting the grass. No, they're flying by. Colin McRae style.
So let's sort of wind back a little bit. How did you get into all this? Where does it all begin?
Really by absolute chance. I mean, I suppose as a kid growing up in London, I went to some fancy schools like Hill House, Westminster School, and then the LSE. But, I'd actually take the tube to work. I mean, we didn't have a car. My mum, she's a single mum. But, I'd walk past, Sloane Square, Sloane Street, and I'd see all these, 928s, 911s, all those kinds of cars, Lamborghini Countaches, which didn't do anything for me in the 80s. And, I look back at my toys, my little Matchbox and Dinky toys and stuff, and I had a lot of Porsches, and I always liked them. Moving to the US to start I was a journalist, a technical PC hardware and gaming journalist, if you will.
Okay.
And I started a website that was like a magazine online at the time in the like 97, and then I sold it in 2001. But I moved to the US to do it because it was just the thing to do back then. Yeah, I don't think yeah, I think that starting a business that way and getting in early doors as far as the internet, just gave me some freedom, because once I sold it, the first thing I went and did was get a 996 turbo. And I pretty much through the course of doing this website that I was doing with reviewing PC parts, video cards and graphics cards, CPUs. I was known for making them run faster than they should. And I'd
Okay.
post about it and tell people how to do that, get more performance so they could get better frame rate in Doom or Quake or whatever.
Yeah,
And
running on floppy disks or whatever it was back then.
exactly. No, CD-ROMs then, but
Okay, yeah.
And then but actually, I was playing a lot of Need for Speed Porsche with a friend in the lab, so I'd be doing that, and so I sold that, retired for about 3 years, as a dot-commer, as they call it, and in that 3-year period, I'd started to, in my garage floor, soup up a 996 turbo, because as soon as I got it, I got on it and I felt, twin turbos kicking in on a freeway on ramp. And I was like, yeah, 415 horsepower and foot-pounds of torque. That's pretty good. I wonder if you can overclock this, And sure enough, it was pretty early days, but there were ways to do it. Basically forcing more boost, and I started. And the way to test it in the US is drag racing, which is really ridiculous. Like, if you have a Porsche of any kind, please don't take it to a drag strip. It's not the right place. But that's what I did. I started measuring that performance, and then I'd post about it, and I'd say, look, my stock 996 turbo does 12.2, or so, and I think it did 12.4, and then I got it to 11.8 in the quarter mile, and the mile per hour jumped. Yeah. And then, when you're driving around, it's kind of nice to have, 100 horsepower extra with just software and bolt-ons and things like that. It was relatively easy. Where it got complicated is when I started to push it further and further. Like, I had the first 996 turbo. Don't know if it was in the world, but it was definitely in the US, that was in the tens, which was a big deal back in, well, it wasn't a big deal. It was a big deal to 3 people probably. But it's a big deal to get, a 10-second quarter mile in like 2003 or whatever, or 4 in that car. And I kept pushing it, more and more stuff
sort
came
of horsepower
out. Yeah, it was a horsepower. At that point it was 650 in 2004. And then I decided, I was quite a lot for it. There wasn't much out there that could run with it. After that, it just, I think my wife was getting pretty tired of people coming over and friends and car friends sort of in a 2.5 car garage, like messing around with cars and taking bits off and oil everywhere and whatever. And she started planting the seed about, you used to have this hobby with computers and you had tons of them, and you would, you turn that into a business. It's like being an alcoholic but running a bar, I guess. If you're an alcoholic, it's probably better if you operate a bar, because you might just survive it. So I was pouring tons of money into, project car and trying to get into the 9s. That was the next phase. I didn't quite get there. I kind of once you start, chasing little tenths and going from 600 to 700 or 700 to 800, it's the money goes way up and the problems go with it. But along the course of that build, I bumped into a Canadian fellow, James Hendry, who was working at a Porsche shop. They're working mostly on air-cooled and some 928s. They'd heard of me, because I was a local person, with this car and doing stuff. And they're like, come on down, or come on up as it was. We have a shop, and, let's try and work on some stuff here, And I would stay after James was finished, after hours, and he was really interested in the car, and he had some ideas of what to do. And I noticed that he was a much, much better or braver mechanic as well than I was. I was like, wow, I can do this. He's like, yeah, you can do it this way, this way, this way. And, it gave me a lot of confidence to play with it even more. And, one thing led to another. We entered the car into a couple of like magazine big horsepower shootouts or whatever.
Yeah.
And we won some of the important events, and we built some cars for some friends. And finally it was like, do you want to work on 928s or the older cars, or do you want to work on these ones? And he's like, no, I think we should work on these ones. So we started a shop, and in 05, in the summer of 05. And primarily at that time, we were just doing 996, turbos and the NA cars as well. On those cars, we were, setting them up for going to the track. And it was around that time, after I did all the drag racing stuff, I started deciding, these cars do really feel great when they turn, go around turns. So we have a bunch of racetracks here, so why don't I just do that? It lasts longer than 9 or 10 seconds as well. So and the stuff still breaks, but it's a lot more fun.
Not quite as quickly.
Not knocking drag racing or anything, but it's a lot more. It's a lot more involving, and you get your thrills, I think, differently that way. So a bunch of people in California, obviously, where they're surrounded by, like where we are in the Bay Area, there's 4 racetracks that are, relatively close by. Laguna Seca is one that everybody knows, or has at least played in a video game. Yeah. So, people started coming with those same cars going, well, I like what you've done with yours. You've let me drive yours. Can you do the same? And so, it wasn't a pre-planned event. I kind of fell into it, and it was a passion thing. I was, bored of PCs and video games, and I decided, well, I grew up in London, but in California, we have some excellent roads as well. So I'll start setting up cars for, going through the, mountains, coastal roads, and, the racetrack as well. So that's how that started. And, like I said, with James, and I have a friend that used to also do what I did with websites, but he was heavily into modifying cars since he was younger than I was. And I asked him to sort of join on like 2 or 3 years later. And, it's like a small family-run business at that point. And we all pretty much think alike in terms of, setting up a car for just, more edge and fun for going, on weekends and or on the track. Yeah, that's how it started. And we branched away as Porsche started introducing, new lines. The 996 GT3, when it first came out, for example, I didn't quite get the car. I was stuck in the turbo world, where power was everything. I mean, taking a 996 turbo from 415 to 800 horsepower was like, the big deal. These GT3s, they don't have any torque. But then once you started going on track and, really, really driving, you realize, a naturally aspirated, high revving engine, and a special one such as the GT3, that's the thing that really hooked us. That engine, there'll never be something like that again, where it really was used on the racetrack every weekend, and the race department basically pushed it over to the street car guys and said, here, you guys, have this engine, make a car, make it a little bit, less noisy and less pollutant, and, have your way with it. But nowadays they won't do that. So that car really got under our skins, and we figured, why not, take something that's already perfect and try and not ruin it and make it better. You'd have to be a moron to modify a GT3, but that's where we come in. So yeah.
Was it called SharkWerks from the beginning?
It was. That came about as a school football player or whatever. There were too many Alexes on the pitch, and going on. Going on buses, when you're supposed to be doing your homework, I was reading about, sharks all the time. So just Sharky came up, So Sharky's ball instead of Alex, and everyone looks around.
Yeah.
And I started my website and magazine that was called Sharky Extreme. That name had always been good, so I don't know, when I discussed it with James at the time, it was either boring auto works or something really off the wall like that. And he's like, yeah, no, I like sharks too. That's kind of how he is. So he's
Yeah.
he's like, yeah, let's just do it that way. I was like, yeah, it's been good to me. And the second day that we were in business, if you will, we suddenly started getting a lot of calls from 928 guys, because there's not a lot of places that work on 928s, and that's known as the Shark. I think there's the BMW, and then there's the 928, and they're known as the Shark. And we're like, no, sorry, we don't, just 996 turbos at the time. So yeah, and it's sort of stuck with it since, I guess.
996 GT3 came out. You started working on them. What were you doing to those as like to start with?
Yeah, well, that was the car that really pushed a hardcore track element, like locally at least. Prior to that, there were a bunch of people with C2 996s or 996 turbos that would go, once a month maybe or something. But, we were having to spend about, people were having to spend about 10K in suspension mods to get it to handle well. Like a 996 turbo handles fine on the street, but take it to a track, it understeers, it floats, it wallows, it needs a lot of work. So yeah, when the GT3 came out, I mean, it was like a good alignment, good tires, and you were off to go, But yeah, we were like, well, we can eke out a bit more power, we can put a lightweight flywheel in, and that's what the RS had, later on, which we didn't get here. And that was another thing that was interesting, because at the time we were very much based in California and working on California cars, or US cars as well. The GT3 here in the US is different than what's marketed in the rest of the world. It doesn't have lightweight buckets. It doesn't have a lightweight flywheel option. It doesn't have, Lexan glass. It doesn't have harnesses. It doesn't have, a bunch of stuff is missing. It's like,
so weird.
What do we? Yeah, it's just like, well, it's because of the DOT and that kind of stuff, right? And it got worse and worse as the 997s and stuff after that. So a lot of people at first wanted a bunch of the European parts, which we would get and retrofit, and then at the same time, it's like, well, everything we used to do on the 996 turbos, making it lighter, making it tighter, all those things help on a GT3 because it's similar. People would be chasing tents or whatever, but you can still. It's a funny slider that you can set it up to be too good on the track, but then terrible on the street. And then, it was fun figuring out what different people wanted and how they wanted it. And, rather than ever experiment on anyone else's car, that's, we agreed early on that we would only make products and sell products and install products that like we actually developed on our car and tried and tested. And so we'd have all these cars, as our own first to, yay or nay them or break the car or figure out a way to fix it or make it better. Yeah, that GT3, that 996 GT3 didn't really excite me at first, but once you got to drive it and sat in it for a while, you started to realize, wow, this is definitely a more fun way to do things, as far as driving interaction and experience. And, you don't really need 800 horsepower on the track.
Yeah.
Actually, most times it makes you slower.
I've definitely I've managed to dodge that journey somehow. Like a lot of my friends started to go into like turbo world, exactly. Yeah. Whether it's a Nissan GTR or whatever, it's all the similar sort of thing. And they start with the normal amount of horsepower, then they want another 100, and then another 100, and then another 500, and then another 1,000. So like literally just keeps going and going and going and going, and you just get
lost.
You just get lost, and you just, as you said, when you start chasing those sorts of things, which are not applicable to the road really at all.
No,
everything just gets more expensive. Everything, every single bit
breaks
of the car
as well. Everything breaks. It's there's a lot of what they call sandbagging. People talking, saying, "Oh yeah, no, I drive it every day. It's got 1,500 horsepower. I go Yeah, I drove it here to the track. What's that trailer there? Oh, yeah, I just don't like it to get dirty, Oh, really? Well, do you want to start it up? Yeah, hold on a second. I need, 3 guys to do that. And then I need to
Yeah,
push it off the trailer. And
I need
then,
some
oh, you go,
alcohol to
yeah, I
like.
need some alcohol to pour in there. Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah, okay. Okay. So you drive this every day, do you? Yeah, I get coffee in it. Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah, those kinds of cars are not that interesting as far as in the Porsche world. But there are some. I mean, I have some friends that do, they stuck with that. They went from drag racing to doing mile events, and a lot of the friends I've made that help me with, tuning on other things, they're doing, 15, 1600 horsepower 997 and 991 turbos that are, running 200 and whatever in the mile. And yeah, I think there was a good friend of mine, Todd from Evolution Motorsports, and then that's somebody we partnered with early on, and he does a lot. He does the tuning side, but he had his own car. It was a 996 turbo. This is, I think, 2006 or 7, and it was at around 1,000 or 1,100 horsepower, completely undrivable on the street. But he entered it into one of those mile events, and he literally spun the car at the finish line, like doing 230 or something. And the reason he spun it is because like a 996 turbo has a sunroof. Well, it caved in. And
Oh,
it caved in, and it just went like this. I was like, yeah, that's not for me. That's not for me.
I see those things and I find them incredibly impressive. And I think the engineering is impressive. And if someone can build a car that can repeatedly do it, that is incredible. But personally, I don't have much desire to go just faster. Because,
No,
I mean,
I think like as you were talking about when you were younger, everything was louder and it sounded cooler, and now it's like you've grown up. Yeah, same with those modifications. I feel like having something that's really smooth, really a wide power band, and thrilling, rewarding. Yeah, it's got good sounds, it's got a good feel, and compliancy. That's another thing. That you want to talk about exhausts. Like in 2004, I set up my 996 turbo with like 1,300-pound springs. There was like cup car level, and it
yeah,
rode terribly on the road, like awful. But I thought it was the best thing ever. But it was like
yeah. You're
nobody
like
would
race
want to
car,
ride in
race
that
car.
thing. Yeah, race car. It's so good, and these roads are so terrible. What a great combo. Yes. And now it's like you go back and you go, wait a minute. You want it to be compliant so that the car's not doing this all the time, and you're correcting, and and you sort of look at what Porsche did, for example, with when they introduced the Porsche active suspension system, the PASM,
Yeah.
when they did it on the Gen 1 GT3, and then they went to the Gen 1 997 GT3, and then they went to the Gen 2. People were wondering, well, why is it a little bit quicker around the ring? And it's like, oh, you drive the two cars and you realize, oh, in the Gen 1, it was like going like this around the ring, the driver would be doing this. And then the Gen 2, it's like much smoother. And you're like, okay. So there are different ways to go faster other than power.
I'd left my Kindle downstairs last night,
Yeah.
and I was looking on my bed to see if I had anything else to read. And the stuff my wife always gives me abuse for the things that are next to my bed. It was like a ride and handling suspension setup book.
Oh,
I
yeah.
was like, I'll just tuck into this for
Yes.
before bed, some light reading. And it was just talking about setting up suspension and how you sort of go about it. And
Compression and rebound and all the good stuff, right?
Exactly, high speed, low speed, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But in terms of doing spring rates and things like that, it was like, well, on a race car, you want the car to be ideally as low as possible for aero or whatever. But then the springs need to be stiff enough or soft enough that you don't bottom out or ping out the top. And then everything needs to be set up so that the wheels stay in contact with the ground for as long as possible. So essentially, the ride is as comfortable as it can be without smashing into the ground, and as low as possible.
Yep. And then you take that further. That's where it gets interesting because, well, for some people that like to read those kind of books, but on a Porsche that's already set up pretty stiff, when you try to change the shocks to a different setup, either from Bilstein, let's say, or Öhlins.
Yeah,
those are the two popular ones we use. They're very different philosophies. Like Bilstein, for example, on their Club Sport, has a really, really low spring rate, and it has a shock that takes over the work, whereas Öhlins has a stiffer spring rate, and the shock does a bit less of the work. So there's different
Right.
approaches. And for the track, the Öhlins is probably it's going to feel a little stiffer and tighter, and some people prefer that, whereas others want there to be a little bit of movement if they're not
Yeah.
exactly rallying, but no track is completely flat. So yeah, it's very gets it
Yeah.
gets a lot of trial and error, except when the shocks are like $8,000 a set. You're like, well, I better experiment on my own car first and figure this out. I don't want someone else figuring it out.
Have you come across or used the DSC Sport systems?
Yeah, they're the
Do you know?
ones that plug into the PASM controllers,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, it's how do I put it? It's not something I'm super keen on. The style of driving we do now mostly and set up for cars is, in California. I'm sure you've seen all the, videos and pictures, but we have a lot of canyons and
Yeah.
mountain roads and coastal roads, and they're a little bit bumpy. So it's having something that's software driven. I find the slider is always moved to well, it's limited by on the Gen 1. I think the refresh rate or whatever you want to call it is pretty
Yeah.
low.
Yeah.
Gen 2s are better, and I think maybe on the 991s it might be better. But I don't like the PASM that much, even on GT3s, until you get to the 991, I guess. But on the 997.1, a lot of the cars that are driven extensively will change to like a non-electronic suspension. We'll
Yeah.
change it to a manually
Conventional
adjustable
setup.
one. And yeah, is that a bit annoying if you have to go under the car or behind the seats and play with some knobs here and there? But I just prefer it that way. I like to have it consistent and know what it's going to do, and not be too variable. Let's put it that way. I mean, there's enough range. If the shock is really good, there's enough range. And I'm just very much a manual feel kind of person, which is strange considering I used to like to change voltages and add extra fans and stuff on computers and stuff. But yeah, I played with it some. But yeah, I'm on the 997 and 996s in particular. I like, well, 996s don't have PASM, but on the 997s, I do like to change to like either a Bilstein Club Sport or a PSS 10 for non-GT cars,
Yeah.
or sometimes Öhlins, and just have compression and rebound yourself.
With those three different types, how would you describe the differences? And okay, I know there's some of them are probably more expensive than others, but how would you sort of scale them?
Yeah, well, I think for a 997 GT3, if it's a Gen 1 or 0.1, with a 3.6 in it, those cars, if you drive them mostly on the street, which most of us do, they tend to be a bit unhinged and unbalanced. They're very reactionary. So I think those cars benefit more from like a Bilstein Club Sport or an Öhlins setup. And as long as you set up the spring rate pretty soft, not like 900 or 1,000 pounds.
What would be a
half of
sort
that.
of standard rate of like an OEM rate on it?
Well, the problem is there isn't a standard. It's more, what are you doing with the car, and the shock works differently company to company. So just because one is 500 in the front, it's not the same on the other
Okay.
one. So
They're not like for like.
No, and even for springs, like on a Bilstein, it's funny, they're barely any. The spring rate itself works out to be barely any stiffer than stock, but the shock is doing a lot more work. So,
Okay.
but yeah, on a Öhlins, I think it's like, if I remember right, I think it's like 650, 850 or something. 650 front, 850 rear. So they're a bit stiffer in terms of the rates, but on a Gen 2, I think they actually did a really good job making it more compliant with the PASM. So 997.2s, all the 3.8s and 4.0. Those cars, we do change them sometimes, but not as often in terms of the shocks.
Yeah.
Most people are happy if we address some of the pivot points that are, they have a little bit of give in them. So if you do like the rear links in the back, or dog bones as they're called. They look like dog bones, and a bump steer correction kit in the back. It just cuts out some of that movement when the car sets into a turn. And
Okay.
there's a part that they later on developed in the 4.0 that's, sort of fixes it. It's a toe link in the back, but every 996, 997, and Cayman of that era, has an eccentric bolt in the back on this lower control arm. So when the car sets into a turn, the toe angle can change. So that
Okay.
makes it just takes away a bit of confidence. So we have a kit that we put in, with more solid ends either side, and then a lockout plate that sets the toe angle, and then it won't change mid-turn.
Okay.
So every 4.0 that we've done, every 911, we usually throw those parts are not that expensive, and they just give it more poise or more, just make it settled, when it's.
So they make it harsher at all, or?
So yeah, you have to play. Yeah, you have to. That's a good point. Those particular ones don't, but there are other ones that we can add that will. And so for someone that's going to the track, it's not an easy thing. Like, I'm not saying it's easy, but if you're like a fast food restaurant and what do you want when you punch it in, it's not quite like that. But we have to ask them what they want, what they're doing with the car, and then I have to sort of imagine, okay, well, this is the best I could do is imagine, well, this is what I'm going to be doing, and then I can show them on my car or cars, and then go from there. So yeah, it's it's a weird formula. After 16 years, I think we're still learning, but we figured out at least the 997s. We figured them out.
Yeah.
996s. So yeah,
I think it's quite interesting going onto your website. If you look at like 997, GT3 RS, that sort of thing, you have a whole bunch of fixes for things that sort of have gone wrong for Porsche. And okay, let's take that car. So my car, 997 Gen 2 RS.
Yep, the best.
If I came to you,
that's the best. That's just the best right there.
It is pretty great. I'm trying to think what's different on my car to stock. Not much really. I have a SharkWerks bypass on it. There we go. Not sponsored.
Yes.
I have a valve switch from a company called Car Newell that lets me have the valves open all the time.
Yeah,
or
that's
shut.
good. Yep, that's especially better than the factory way, which it sort of opens and closes based on vacuum.
I can't stand that system of having, because I realized it made me drive like an absolute dick. Like, because you want to hear the noise, but to hear the noise, you have to be going over 4,000 RPM or something.
Yeah.
And to get to 4,000 RPM, you have to put your foot down if you want to do it in any situation.
Yep.
And then you lose all of the burbles and everything on the way back down.
Yeah, the overrun.
Which is probably the best part of it. I think my rear anti-roll bar is set stiffer than normal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was done before I got the car, and I like the way it drives. And then I actually have a DSC Sport system, which I've just plugged in. I haven't really messed with, and I think that does improve compliancy around town a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm sort of interested in the full other end of the spectrum. They do a set of shocks and dampers as well. And I would love to drive a car that's been set up with all that tech to see what that's like as like a daily versus track. Because I think you get quite a broad spectrum of the difference of the cars. One thing I know you've definitely had a fix for is I've had the coolant pipes go on my car. And I weirdly, and they were wearing out or whatever, and they were changed under warranty by Porsche.
Yeah.
And then the day I picked the car up, I was driving it after they'd been changed, and they exploded off, which was, luckily I was going in a straight line, but that worked out. Yeah. But I know that's something that you guys have come up with a solution for.
It's funny that, well, it isn't funny for people that have done it at the track and had it go on the back tire and they've spun and ended up off the track. Isn't funny for them, but that's something that we found by chance before the GT3s actually. Because the problem is really terrible on 996 turbos and GT2s and 997 turbos, and it's something that's like not a great design or implementation. Glue and heat cycles and different metallurgy don't combine to last very
Yeah.
long. I mean, some cars like 997 GT3s, would do it in the first year of ownership. But, the turbos, it took a little longer. But yeah, we figured it out when we were building 996 turbo engines, I think in '05. I remember James, we had a smaller shop then, and I think I was talking to a customer about probably some 700 horsepower turbo or something, and he came in with like, he was building a 3.8 liter 996 turbo engine. So, it's all the same block and similar design. Internals are very different, but he came in and, he's like, "Hey, look at this." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, got, parts he's taken off below the intake manifold, and, there's like bunch of, lines, and he's like, "Look, watch this." And I was like, "Okay." He's like, "Hold on there." And he goes, "Boink." I was like, "What the hell?" It's like, "Yeah, this could be a problem." Looks like it was going to come out. And I was like, "Oh, okay." He's like, "Well, let's think about this, while we're building this engine." And then about 2 weeks later, a customer with a highly modified 996 turbo came in on a flatbed or a truck, trailer, whatever, and coolant spewing everywhere. And James is like, "Okay, let's have a look." And he's like, "Oh, look, it's one of those lines. It's at the back. I don't have to take the engine out to fix it." So, he fixes it, to get them back on the road. And then like a week later, another one comes out. And James is like, "Oh, okay, I see what's happening here. There's 7 locations, and it's going to go to the next one." So yeah, so we figured it out, and on every single high horsepower 996 turbo engine that we built, we're like, "Well, we're taking it out. We're going to fix that. We're going to come up with a way to basically pin it so." I don't care if it's 100 degrees or 45 degrees outside, but you can have a gorilla hanging from it. It won't come out. You can't have that happen. And then it started happening on especially 997 GT3s later on, and we already knew how to fix that. And so we just sort of wrote this article up, and I think it was on. I think Dan who works for us posted it on there, one of the Porsche forums. I think it was Renlist, and on our site. And of course we got a bunch of hate for it immediately, because like, "Oh, this never happens." And every Porsche dealer was like, "No, this never happens, and it did finally sort of come out there that it happened. And then there's a big debate whether to weld it or pin it, and I'm like, well, you can try welding different metallurgy if all you want, but if you ask a real welder, welding in that area is really pointless. And
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you can show your welding skills, but it has to be done really well. I've seen a bunch that are welded and poorly, and it's leaking and failed anyway. So,
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a gotcha, and it's unfortunate. James is a bit more unkind about it. He's probably like, "Oh, maybe that was like a summer student's idea at Porsche, an intern or something." I was like, "Well, we all make mistakes." So yeah, that's an annoying one, definitely.
I really wish I'd done it when I like fitted a new clutch.
Yeah.
Rather than what happened is I literally fitted a new clutch, which now you fit the 4-liter clutch, and then the car went in for some warranty work separate to that. Went back to Porsche. They, under warranty, changed the coolant pipes, but they literally just changed them to exactly the same. And I think they did a rubbish job. Now, maybe they didn't, but it literally came off within half an hour of them changing them.
Yeah, they probably, I mean, if you don't know and you don't really, really think about it and what the consequences are, I mean, you could just be like, "Okay, well, I'll just glue it back in." But you have to really clean it. Sometimes you have to get new parts, and actually when we do a coolant fix, we'll get all new hoses and lines. And that coolant fix gets better, because just when you think you fixed it, you haven't. So, because at the end of that story is, for like 3 years, we were like, "Hey, we don't have any problems. We fixed this, we fixed this." And then later on, like 3 years, when we were doing the 3.9 engine, which is another thing where we pushed things further and further, and we broke more and more stuff. And then later on, there were some failures on the 3.8 and 4.0, and service bulletins, and we're like, oh, we've seen that, we've done that, we've
Yeah.
done that, we fixed that. But yeah, there's another gotcha, which is there's these two on a GT3 and on a turbo. There's these two plastic elbows that come into the block from the oil coolers, and we didn't know this, but there was coolant leaking from a car that we'd done a coolant fix on, a GT3 3.9, and we're like, what the hell's going on? It's like, okay, I guess engine out, and we look at it, it's like, it's not leaking from anywhere there, but there's coolant coming out, when you're really getting on it hard at the track, as this guy was doing. He's having to put, a 2-liter bottle of coolant in after every, session, basically. It's like, that can't be right. And so finally we took everything off on this. We took this engine out, took it apart. We were like inspecting, head gaskets. And then, one of the last two pieces you take off the block are these two little plastic elbows. And then James comes in again. He's like, hey, look at this. I'm like, look at what? It's this black coolant pipe. And then he sticks a little razor blade.
Yeah.
And it goes right in the slot of a crack. And I was like, oh shit. When you push these cars like you do, because that's what they're for, many years later, and sometimes not so many years later, problems arise. And that's been kind of fun, actually. Like we really love the 997 GT3 and 996 GT3. Like we've owned multiple ones of them, and built 3.9 liters and 4.1s, all around the world for people. But part of that process was doing, 10, 11 major fixes, like when we did the 3.9, we broke a bunch of stuff. And then when we did the 4.1, I mean, it wasn't like, hey, let's just build a 4.1 and, oh, that's cool. No, it was like, 7, 8 attempts, and we broke a bunch of stuff doing it over the course of 2 years. And then, once we sort of fixed that, then we could also go back, now, 10, 12 years later, when people are just getting them or getting into them, or they've got miles on them, and we don't have to build a 3.9, but we can take all the fixes that we've done and do beyond just a coolant fix. We can fix the cam adjusters, the bolts backing out. We know about the freeze plugs coming out of the bottom, better clutches and flywheels, and we know more about this kind of stuff now because James has built many of these engines now, and we've run them pretty hard. I mean, there's people that have tracked multiple years, trying to use their 997 GT3 as a sort of cup car, alternative, and so they've campaigned them, and they've all held together and well, and we've figured out ways to improve things when running them harder. So that applies back to someone that doesn't necessarily want to modify their car beyond having a SharkWerks bypass or something.
Yeah.
But usually it's a slippery slope for a bunch of people. They want to do a bunch of things.
Absolutely. And it's something that I think about now. Now, Porsche, they do run their warranty program, and you can still have a warranty. So I've got a warranty on my car for the next 3 years, and I think it costs me, it works out at about £1,000 a year. So it's not expensive.
No, that's a really good deal.
But I do look at, and I know, no offense, Porsche, but when they look at the car, they're not looking at absolutely everything, and they're just technicians that are just changing bits and whatever. And I go, well, okay, well, how long am I going to have this car for? And what are the small changes I probably need to do, or bits I need to change over time to mean it keeps running really well, and I don't have, for example, some coolant pipes exploding and dumping coolant under the rear wheels in a situation that could write off your car. And right off your car, but you also might get injured in the process.
Yeah, or hit someone on the track or whatever. Yeah, that's
exactly. How do you go about sort of researching that? Do you start with things that are done to race cars as like a starting point, Porsche might have done? And how does that work?
Yeah, a little bit like that. I mean, there's sometimes we'll do it that way, and the way you just listed it, where, oh, well, what would Porsche do? Or not that we're, or we sort of imagine what they do. And for one of the newer lines of cars, we did exactly that, which is when the GT4 came out, there was no RS. And we're like, well, we know what to do. Every RS differentiates from a non-RS with a lightweight flywheel, easy,
Yeah.
done. A little bit more power, easy, done. Better gearing, easy, done. A little bit more aero, boom. And then, we never said it was an RS, but when we built our GT4 program, I think we've done about, 20 odd of those, plus some spiders. Journalists were like, oh yeah, this is kind of like, a GT4 RS if there was
Yeah.
one. And notice they didn't make that mistake again for the 718. They have an RS coming, so for those. But yeah, that is very much, a formula that Porsche, we imagined, well, this is what Porsche would do if they wanted to. And then you go back to the GT3, which is, it's not as if Porsche couldn't do a 3.9 or a 4.1. They could do it a million times better than we could.
Yeah.
They probably don't want to spend $8,000 on a crank for a car they make thousands of. Whereas, we're like, oh yeah, that sounds great. How much are the pistons? Oh yeah, that sounds great. Another $8,000? Sure. So when we're doing cars for, in smaller, way smaller batches, we can really focus in and spend more money on certain things to get, eke out more performance. And from a, manufacturer's standpoint, that would be like the biggest waste of money ever.
Yeah.
And, when they're trying to be profitable and they're successful at that, there's no need. There's no need for something like that from them. But for us, we're a little, mental, and a lot of our customers are sort of mental as well. And they're like, yeah, what's the problem? I'll spend, 60 grand US to go from a 3.8 to a 4.1 and have, 100 horsepower and, 60 foot-pounds more torque, and probably be, that much faster at the track.
Yeah.
But, it's nothing's ever perfect. You can always improve it. And I do sometimes wish we, I don't know, not to knock a BMW, or because it's the ultimate driving machine, I know. But if we'd sort of started on a Toyota Camry, maybe, it would be in some ways easier to improve.
You can
and
be
less
like,
expensive.
We spent this amount and we got a 400% improvement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the 4.1 was really hard to do and really expensive, and for a small place like us. And it took a lot of, some of it was guessing, some of it was planning, some of it was mathematics, some of it was, well, what if? And some of it didn't work out, and some of it did. And then, you sort of shape it over the course of 2.5 years, and there's no, limit on time. I mean, I would have been happy if we'd only ever accomplished one, which was, that one, and it wasn't anywhere near as easy as doing the 3.9. The 3.9 was like a less ambitious project. You take steps and, go further and further. So this was one of those ones where, it very nearly didn't happen. And I don't think there are many places in the world that build, 4.1 Gen 2s and Gen 1s. 997 GT3s. I don't think they do. It's because it's not easy to. It's very hard to do. There's a lot more ways to get it wrong than right. That's for sure. And luckily, and through perseverance and money and expertise from James and Dan and some of it myself and some other friends we had, like I mentioned, Todd, with the tuning. And a bunch of other people, that helped along the way. It got done. And, I look at it as, I was telling you, it wasn't so much that, look at us, we can do a 4.1. It's also all the things that we broke along the way and we know how to fix. And now the best part is that, like I said, we love those cars, and I want to see those cars on the road for a long time. And they're going to need help, once, they're not new anymore. They're antiques almost. I mean, I look at them and, before there'll be like a 964,
Yeah.
Which is another thing we got into as well, going back and doing those. And we took a lot of what we learned on, because it's a Metzger block and, similar to the engine in those two cars, just, no water and a few other less things. But, like I said, trial and error, perseverance, luck, a lot of luck. You need that, and a lot of money. And, not for profit. It's
Yeah.
going to take some time to get profit. We'll have to build a lot of them.
Does reliability, or not necessarily reliability and service intervals, I guess those are sort of two questions, I guess, about doing engine upgrades like that, 3.9 or 4.1. Does that take a big hit or not too bad?
No, that's a really good, that's a really good segue actually. So, like I was telling you, we do everything on our car first, and for the 3.9, that took about 18 months to develop, from start to finish, meaning from when it ran to when it was finished, not when we thought about it. And there are plenty of local customers that, seen the car, tried it, and they're like, oh, I want to do it. And actually, the way we did that was we went from 3.6 to 3.8 and then 3.9. And we put, I think, about 20,000 hard miles on it first. And then, we started building it. And, once we knew by the time 20,000 was done and we'd taken it apart and everything,
Yeah.
we're like, this is going to work. This is going to be reliable. There's no problems. And, maybe we were arrogant about it and that, well, there's never going to be any problems. And if there are, we'll just take care of it. And, that's the reason for the 4.1. It took, more like 3 years of development before we started building them for anyone. I think we were proven right because there's several people that have 3.9s. One in particular that has he had 30,000 miles on his GT3 3.6.
Yeah.
And then he put, I think it was 95,000 miles on his 3.9, and it was still running fine. It was using a little bit more oil, right? So and when I say 95,000, he's he's on Instagram. His snowboarder 54, and he used to be on Renlist. When I say hard miles, they're very hard miles. He drives very hard, very fast, and through very windy roads.
Yeah.
So that was on top of our torture test of our own, which I'm not going to imply. We're not. It's not like Porsche where they have bazillions of dollars to go and test it in Iceland and no, but it did survive the torture test. And I mean, there are no known, we don't have failures on those cars. We build them with confidence, and we do all those fixes as well. And I think anyone that's had it, is still enjoying it. We've done this particular car at 95 when we took it apart. He's like, well, can we do a 4.1 now? so we did do that, and I think he's got maybe like 25,000 miles on his 4.1 now on top of it. And that transmission is still original as well. So
That's
I think
impressive.
one day when we rebuild that, we'll probably re-gear it, make it, shorter close ratio like mine. Yeah.
You made yours shorter?
Yeah, I did. I'm a cheater like that.
That's not cheating.
Well, it's like fake torque, right? You bring everything down, and so yeah, I think there were a few journalists that drove my blue car, and it was like I noticed one particular test. There was a 4.0, stock 4.0, that we've actually worked on and done all the fixes on, and then there was a 3.8 RS like yours, and then there was the 4.1, and they were doing these rolling sort of drag races, if you know what I mean, just to kind of they knew it was faster, but they were like, let's just see, and the 3.8, unfortunately, they were like, okay, fine, we're done, okay, obviously it's not gonna be we're not gonna compare it. Then the 4.0, it was still markedly different to the point where they're like, okay, how do we make this more challenging? Okay, what we'll do is, and the 4.0 has a shorter final drive.
Okay.
So it's geared differently in that way. So in the 4.0, what they did is they went in second gear, rang it out, and in mine they put it in third gear, which it was stock at the time.
Yeah.
And it's still mine just pulled away. And they're like, okay, yeah, that's a really good hook and story in the story. So they put that in there. But I always thought, yeah, I've driven so many 4.0s as well, and it was something we went back and addressed, because on the GT4, one of the complaints that people have, and I think one journalist said it, and then every single journalist said it. I mean, I always just,
Yeah.
I wasn't as upset about the long gears. I mean, it is a bit weird going 80 miles an hour or whatever in second gear. It's a little weird.
Yeah.
But, you know, and I partnered with Guard Transmission to make, you know, these gears for us, and a limited slip differential. You know, there's another thing we fix on the GT3s because that thing's weak. It's like a weak clutch and
Mine's
it wears
quite
out.
like,
Yeah. Yeah, which is fun having an open diff sometimes, but it's not very safe. And when you add more power, you definitely don't want that. So yeah, you know, I like the feeling of, you know, closer ratios, you know, short gears. I think it's just more, you can go, you can go quicker, slower? I know,
yeah, you
faster,
feel
but
like
quicker.
you're going
I don't
faster
know. Yeah.
at slower
Yeah,
speeds because you're
yeah.
revving it more.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the exciting part comes, you know, it brings the power, or not the power, but the exciting part down to like, you know, from 30 to 90, it's like super
Yeah.
punchy and you know, which is fun in the back roads. You know, this company was making gears for, you know, for gears for years, for all the race cars and race teams for a long time, and LSDs, so limited slip differentials. Yeah, as opposed to, yeah, I don't know if they made those. Yeah, yeah. So, you know, it's just another way to go faster, right? And another, probably making up for my lack of driving skill. That's probably what it is.
No, it's definitely, I think with the GT4, I had a GT4 for a bit. And driving it back to back with the GT3 just was not a good competitor.
No.
But a big thing was the gearing, and I think it is one of those things. Once someone said it, you can't unhear it, and you go like, okay, genuinely, this car's nearly doing 90 in second. So if I've got a manual gearbox, I would quite like to be changing gear every now and then. And maybe be able to get to third. That's probably nice. And then you can blip down to second and off you go again. Whereas you don't necessarily want to go to first because that's a bit of a pain.
No, but what's funny is they designed it with that auto blipper so that you did do that. Like I've never ever in the history of Porsche I've owned many Porsches. I would never gear down, you know, like heel. Well, you can always heel toe, sure, but I'm saying you would never like gear down from second to first to go into a turn, right? But in a GT4, it's like they wanted you to do that. It's bizarre. So because that never feels good, right? The shift never.
No, and it's all very transfer.
Yeah.
And then first it seems short enough. Like it really is quite short. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know whether it's actually long or short, but in my experience of driving on like a Alpine road, for example, with like hairpins and stuff, with the 3.8, and I got ruined I went to Silverstone and drove this was before I'd even bought my car. I drove what did I drive? 997, Gen 1, Gen 2, 4 litre.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Back to back. And the 4 litre just had so much more torque and punch at the bottom. And that stuck in my mind forever. Yeah. Fast forward a couple of years, driving around the Alps, get to a hairpin. First gear is too slow. Like you hit the top of first before you're out of the corner, and then you've got to change. So that doesn't work. Yeah. Nope. Second gear is you're too low down, unless you really, really, really commit, which is
go fast
and go really fast. Yeah. Then you're just about in the power band for when you come out, but it's just in that in-between bit that it just doesn't work, and you go, okay, either a dollop more torque or possibly even lower, but normal driving.
It's funny, that was, that was to me the most interesting of the new cars from the 991 era and 981, but that was the most interesting one because it, you know, you own the 3.8 RS. There's bits of it that feel a bit familiar, you know, whereas if you drive a 991, nothing feels familiar compared to those two cars. Like it doesn't feel like a continuation. And the GT4 had that feel in the front with the suspension, braking, and steering. The electric steering was actually done really well in that car. I was impressed with it. And, you know, it won't leak like those might and do. Not mine, but they do.
They can,
they do. So watch for that. Everyone with those cars, watch for that. That's another hydraulic steering fluid is highly flammable. You don't want that.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah.
Nice.
So when you take the engine out, inspect those lines and maybe replace them because they run all the way
Okay.
from the front to the back.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. Well, as they get older, we got to look for things. But yeah, the
Look at these things.
GT4
Yeah.
was the one that interested me most out of that lineup. But when I got it and I picked it up, my buddy Magnus went with me. We he sort of helped me order. Said no, spec this out, and he's like, do this. I was like, all right. And I picked it up, and it was like, I know it's a GT car, but it just doesn't feel like one quite. It's very civil. I don't know if it's civilized. It was very refined. It didn't have the edginess that I'm used to with multiple 996 GT3s, 997 GT3s, and RSs and everything. And so it felt like the least GT car that I'd ever owned. It
Yeah.
was really great. And then I drove it straight home from LA up to the Bay Area, which is like 300 miles. And I was like, yeah, I'm not really feeling it. I'm trying to figure something out here. I'm not feeling it. And then I got home and then I told my wife, well, it's going to get modified starting tomorrow. So if you want to drive it stock and try it out because you won't want to drive it later, then go ahead. We went down like a back road that, my little, Nürburgring road where I live or lived
Yeah.
then. And I noticed, I sort of put my hand on on the little door pocket and the handrail there. I was like, why am I grabbing that? And then I'm like, and she's talking as well. She's talking and driving really quick, and she doesn't know it. So I realized quickly. I was like, okay, this chassis is really good, like really good, to the point where you're flying and you don't even feel it and know it. And so I was like, okay, well, the suspension is brilliant, like really brilliant. But it needs, going back to the whole thing of, well, what would Porsche do if they released an RS? So I was like, well,
Yeah.
people are complaining about the gears. I know someone that, makes gears and has done for many years. So we'll partner with them. We'll get, our stack or our ratio down to where we want, lightweight flywheel to liven it up. Better aero, a bit more power with like, a GT3 throttle body from a 997 plenum, some filters and some exhaust work. And, you have about another 35, 36 horsepower, which
That's
doesn't
quite a
sound
lot.
like a lot. Yeah, and better response and gearing, fake torque, and acceleration from the flywheel. And it became like a much, more edgy, GT
Kind of
like car.
aggressive car.
Yeah, it was aggressive, and you could, on top of the chassis, which that's the one car that's the one Porsche I did not change anything on the suspension. As for a mid-engine platform, it's really dialed in well, and it's come a long way from like the Cayman S from '06 that I had. That we did
Yeah.
Bilsteins and H&R sway bars and different control arms. And then the Cayman R, same thing. So but for them, it was a natural progression, I think. They're not just going to, like the 996 GT3, the Gen 1, there was no RS. And then the Gen 2,
Yeah.
only in '05, they made like a few RSs for, not for here. But it's there's one thing I couldn't get over with that car, and it was the engine, which even with a bit more power and responsiveness, like compared to those,
It's just
it's not a motorsport engine. So,
that's the really unfortunate thing. As I think I drove my car and I didn't drive it very much, and I really was driving it back to back with my GT3, and
Yeah.
I appreciated all of the modernness and that sort of stuff, and you can appreciate the handling and whatnot. But every time I'd get back in the GT3 and then go to the GT4, you just go, oh man, this is why the GT engines in the 911s, like that's what you pay for. You're paying like that's worth the upgrade alone. It's just the engine difference, and no exhaust, no nothing changes the way that engine works.
Exactly. It's like a connection. Like everything about that car and those cars feels like home to me. The amount of pedal pressure, the amount, the way the shifter feels. The GT4 did have a nice transmission feel to it. I'll give it that. But a lot of mid-engine cars do. Like an NSX has a terrific feel. Well, some don't. I had a Lotus Evora S, I love that car. It was like a
Yeah.
heritage edition. It was like there were only 4 of them, but I think there are probably only 10 of Auras anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. But it had like the worst shifter cables and design and feel of a shifter that probably turned everybody off from that car. You know, it had these shifter cables that went, you know, from the front of the transmission or the back of it, I guess the back of the car,
Yeah.
you know, and all the way around the engine to the top and into the tunnel. And it was like, of course they're going to stretch and feel frayed
Yeah.
and all this stuff. So anyways, yeah. So I was going to say most, you know, mid-engine cars, the layout means that the transmission's like right there and it feels good. But so the GT4 did have a good feel there. But yeah, the transmission itself, though, as we found out, you know, there's a very known problem with third gear failure. You know, pretty much. I mean, has that been something that came up in your ownership? Did you know of people that had the third gear failure on that car? Have you heard about it? It's a
No, not
big
at
thing
all.
here. Yeah, it's a big thing here. There's a recall, and Porsche would basically
Okay.
replace your transmission. If you have a GT4 981 or 718, because it's exactly the same, although I think they've updated the third gear on that one. But look up third gear failure and probably, you know, grab a stiff drink of something because it's going to affect you at some point. Yeah, but they did warranty them all here, so they did step up. I mean, you know, credit to them for that. But yeah, so when we did that, we used solid gears and a different design, so that couldn't happen, so that it couldn't be a failure point. It's always, you know, we try to make it more edgy and more fun, but with more money and hopefully with some, you know, thought, we can actually future proof it or make it last longer.
In the GT4, did you change the final ratio or did you change all the gears?
No, I don't like doing that. I feel like that is one way to do it, and that's fine. But I actually liked making them closer ratio, all, you know, and stacked together like that. That, you know, there was more control, and then I could have 6 gear be completely stock, so that I'm not on the freeway at like 70 miles an hour going at 4,500 RPM. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's not good. I don't want that. And that wears things out more if you do that. And so, no, what we did is, you know, there's a different, the second gear, the all important one, is on the main shaft. And so we have 2 options. One is to just replace 3, 4, and 5, and that's for track guys. And then the guys in the, like you and I that drive on the street, it would be change the main shaft and second is on there, and then 3, 4, and 5, and then keep 6 stock. There are a couple of occasions, I think, where we did change 6th, you know, made that shorter, and that's for, you know, people doing whatever 200 miles an hour at Daytona or some shit like that. So but generally keep that stock. Yeah. So learning all that and doing all that, it was like, how do I make the 4.1, you know, years later? How do I just, you know, tweak it a tiny bit and make it a bit more, you know, edgy? And so yeah, it was like, yeah, I know what the 4.0 always had, you know, basically a different final drive. So why not change, you know, some of the gears that I want? So I have, that car has a slightly taller first gear, but that's really cool because it has a crazy limited slip and extra torque. So it, you know, really catapults out. And then it has, you know, slightly shorter second and then shorter third and shorter fourth. So what's happened is where I used to be doing 3.2, which was in those cars a little bit awkward.
Yeah.
I mean, I like it, but it's a bit awkward. I'm now 3.4, you know, 3.43 mostly.
3.43 is a great movement.
3.43 is easy money every time.
Yeah.
So yeah, and with the torque as well from the engine, it's like, yeah, I probably, you know, I wouldn't recommend changing the gear ratios in a 3.8 RS on its own. I think it's actually done pretty well, and I noticed you're like, oh, why'd you change the gears on that? And you're probably right. I think the Gen 1 cars need it more, because that's another difference that they have. They have a different, you know, set of gears.
Yeah,
and that's partly why the 3.8 is quicker as well. But with a 4.1, it just sort of made sense to give it a shot and do some math, which my gear guy did, you know, the spreadsheets, and we sort of talked about it, and we were like, okay, well, this mile per hour, and I was like, yeah, I think I'd really like to drive mine at 3.43 all the time. So,
yeah.
So yeah,
all of those builds, the 3.9 and the 4.1, they all start from a base Metzger engine. So could you take that like any turbo, any GT3.
Yeah, you can technically, but for the turbo cars, we've only we don't build those engines that much anymore. Our friends that we knew in '05, they took that mantle and they're doing, 1,500 horsepower. But when we did, we would do 3.8. We found that to be a sweet spot because, you're not doing. I mean, you are relying more on turbo and cylinder pressure, and having a 4.1 or 4 point something, versus a 3.8 is going to create a myriad of more problems. For a turbo car with like 800, 900.
Can you build a turbo engine into a NA engine? Or are they quite different?
No, you could. It would be really, I started thinking about this once because people used to ask me that, but maybe 20 years from now, people will take those because they're more plentiful.
Yeah,
and the case is very similar, but things like the crank and the pistons and the heads are not. But could you do that? Yeah, actually. Somebody famously took a 997 GT3 engine and turboed that. Okay. So they took about a bunch of parts. Yeah, very strange, but yeah. But yeah, with machining and parts, you could, I suppose. Yeah, you could.
Yeah, but my only thinking,
you could do it like Lego.
Get it.
Just dump it out.
What's going to be cheaper? A turbo engine is going to be cheaper than a GT3 engine, probably.
Yeah.
And is it possible? But you can take a 997 Gen 1 normal GT3 and 4.1 that.
Yeah, we weren't doing that at first because those cars have a really different. They have no stability management and they have traction control, but it's very old school and quite dangerous.
Yeah.
And most of those cars have well, not most, but they have 305s in the back, so skinnier tire, and we just felt like at the time 3.6 to 3.9 was like safe on those cars, and but now we've started doing those, and we finished a cool Gen 1 pumpkin orange RS for somebody in Seattle, and then we're going to build another Gen 1 for someone in Hong Kong. Ooh, I don't know how that's going to go. A little bit of a dicey situation in Hong Kong at the moment, unfortunately. So, but yeah, if the car gets here, we'll do it, and that'll be hopefully bring some joy to somebody there.
Yeah, I'm just pondering whether I can get hold of an early engine. I don't know how you get where these parts and bits come from, and then just plonk it in.
Yeah, you could do that, and we've built a few 3.9s for 996 GT3s as well. I have not done a 4.1, and I think I'm putting my foot down and saying I'm never going to do a 4.1 in that. There was the second 3.9 that we ever built for a 996 GT3. It was like we built it, sent it off to a guy in Canada. He lasted 2 laps. He went into a wall. Yeah, with the 3. Well, yeah, no. Well, the 3.9 again, skinnier tires. The 996 GT3 skinnier tires, no traction control, except the throttle body closes when you get airborne, as I found out. That's not a nice feeling. Yeah. So that's technically traction control of some kind. Yeah, I had my 996 GT3, the 3.9 one. It was a white one, and we did like blue wheels and a big RS wing, kind of like the RS in Europe. But it had a plate, license plate. Everyone does personalized plates in California. But it just said no PSM on it. And it was literally, I found that out like the week after I got that plate, and I was like, I guess there is kind of traction control, sort of. So yeah, because PSM is Porsche Stability Management for everybody. It's one of the buttons on your center console that you don't really want to push. Just leave it alone most of the time.
No, half off. In my car,
okay, half off. Well, in your car, yes. Yeah, you've got SC and SC plus TC. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and
so
I like the fact with that generation of cars, it's not. You don't have to press and hold stuff for ages. You don't have to press OK. No, and it's just like off. Okay, you're on your own. Fine.
Yeah, go away. Go away and spin. Yeah, and it's funny. I was saying like not to knock the turbos because again they have a great place, and I've had
They're cool
bunches of
things.
them. I've had a '79 Widowmaker 911 turbo, which I must admit when I was at the time it was like '05 I think when I got it.
Yeah.
And oh man, I got it for like 17 grand US, which is like 1/20, well, 1/10 of what it's worth now, probably.
You never know. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also sold it for about the same like 3 years later. So good job there. Yeah, I was definitely working, selling cars, buying and selling cars. But I had one of those, and I think it was, and I insisted on getting a '79 because that was the first year of the intercooler. And it was, like a slightly bigger displacement motor. And I was like, oh, yeah, it'll be great. And I had it next to, my 700 horsepower 996 turbo. And it was like, huh, this is a Widowmaker? Really?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And on like
well,
new tires. You're like,
yeah,
it's not
no,
that bad.
I mean, I upgraded the shocks. I did a bunch of stuff. And then I upgraded the turbo and the intercooler and the exhaust. And then I was like, yeah, this is great to look at, but yeah, the 930s are not my favorite. And then Magnus has a bunch of them, so I drove some of his. He has the earlier ones, and I
Yeah.
remember being like stuck on the 5 freeway, which is like that's not a place to go driving. LA traffic is not the place to go driving. So yeah, I was driving one of those, and I was like, yeah, this is why I don't like turbos. Nothing until 4 grand, and then it was a little bit. We did actually. We built a GT2 together. Like a sort of Magnus was always influencing me from the moment I met him. He's like, look at these air cooled cars. They're so wonderful. And I was like, yeah, they are. And I'd had a few, but
Yeah.
it's probably his fault that we went into the 964 world, because at the time he was building one too, and we I know everybody builds a wannabe Singer 964, right? And nobody can do anything close to what they do. But yeah, no, we have like a program that we have for 964s, which is the car still looks like a 964. It's not changed like that. I mean, other than lowered and maybe some wheels, but has a 3.8 liter engine, lightweight flywheel, our own tuning and injectors, and things like that. And it's like a 350 horsepower and fun suspension, and like a modern day RS, that's more compliant.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Is yours red?
Yes, with gold wheels.
Yeah.
Thanks, Magnus. yeah, he's our stylist. But yeah, and I don't know if you've seen our GT2, the one with the orange bumpers and the Union Jack on. Yeah. So that was his doing, and but I was going to say the GT2 is another one where if you just drive one of those cars and you own one of those, you're like, I don't get it. But if you live with it, and you use it a lot, it kind of grows on you and gets under your skin, and there's like that's a really amazing implementation of the turbo, I would say, for Porsche. Like the 997 GT2 is you can drive it in a similar fashion to that car because it has the same suspensions, a little bit heavier. Yeah, it has a lot more torque and less revs, but once you get settled with it and you just you can drive it nice and smoothly. When I first got the car, I was like, hey, let me turn this off, and with 800 horsepower that we put in it, stomp on the gas and it's like going sideways on the freeway. You're like, yeah, okay, this is stupid, but it really does handle well. And then if you're pointed straight, once you've dealt with the corners, you don't have to like
fully mash.
Do that. You can just go, like this. Yeah, you can kind of ease into it and drive it smooth, and it's still rewarding. But it doesn't have it doesn't make your hair stand up on the back of your neck with the sounds and the mechanical noises.
I've driven a 997 Gen 2 GT3 once. Where was I? It was in like Bahrain or somewhere like that, and it was slightly dusty roads.
Yeah, probably down about 100 horsepower with the heat.
Yeah. It was kind of fun, but it didn't feel in any way dangerous or loony or all the things that I've heard about turbo cars. I was like, this is like, it's got enough torque to, break traction and whatnot, but it didn't feel scary in the slightest whatsoever. And like you said, it doesn't have the top end fizz that you get with a
No.
GT3.
And it doesn't get its credit, because what it actually did for these cars, so because that car came out in '08, and it was the first car that had like what I would call proper PASM. Like the one in the Gen 1 GT3s and in the S's, and they were just very bouncy and just not that compliant. But the GT2 had a next generation, like PASM setup, and it also had stability management and traction control. So it's very similar to the 3.8 RSs in that sense, and 3.8 GT3s. I actually like them more than the GT2 RS that came out later. Those were pretty tricky and violent to drive. They were, quite responsive. The suspension was really stiff, and it was, meant to go fast, I guess, around the ring in, some amazing driver's hands.
Yeah.
But like most of us would end up in the wall. So that one. But the GT2, you're right, was different than the 996 GT2. The 996 GT2 had no stability management of any kind of like the 996 GT3. And I definitely remember instances of following friends or driving with them, and they had a 996 GT2, and they'd go around the same turn that I did, at 40 miles an hour, and suddenly they're like this, fishtailed that way. Like, ooh. So that one was a little sketchier, especially with more power. But the tires were worse then too. So there's that. That's going back to you said, oh, would you build a 4.1 for like a Gen 1 or a 996? Part of the reason we never did build, when we started, a 4.1 for the Gen 1s was they were on Pilot Sport Cup tires, which are good tires, but they're not like the Cup 2. They're nowhere near as grippy. Yeah, and with the Cup 2...
Safe.
Safe, yeah. I mean, the GT2 had Cup 1s on it and was really sketchy with 800 horsepower. Really sketchy. With Cup 2s, was, quite a bit less sketchy.
I'd like to drive a GT2 or RS, but with sort of like 800 horsepower or 700 or something, because I think that's probably the amount that, weirdly, that it starts to feel like, this is a bit crazy, and this is more crazy than a different experience to you get in the GT3.
Yeah. Well, and that was a car too. That was a car where, we didn't do it at the time. We'd worked on a bunch of them when they were new, and all we did then was, set them up for the track with some suspension changes and, exhaust to make it sound better, and, tuning to make it go to 600 horsepower or something. But the factory did an RS, and they did a lot of the things that, made sense, like lightweight flywheel, slightly different turbos and things that we did as well, right? And so that's what we did to ours. But we made it so it would be, reliable at that sweet spot without, having to build an engine or make it so, it's got check engine lights, which, everybody loves those. Obviously. So it's everyone's favorite. Yeah, no, I think 700, 750 is like it makes it an exciting car. And like I left mine with the way that happened actually was I got back from Arizona, and I stopped in at his place because it was pouring with rain. So instead of going from Arizona to Northern California, I stopped in LA, where it never rains, and it was raining solid for like 3 days. And we sat around, and he's like looking at the car. I think this was 2015 or something. And he's like, oh, are you going to fly back? And I was like, yeah, I don't have anywhere to park it. He's like, I got room. And I was like, okay. And, I was like, okay, well, I don't think I'm going to wait out this rain. It seems like it's going to rain for like days. So I'll just fly back and leave it here. And then he's like, anything I should know? I was like, no, just drive it. It's got a bunch more power than a normal one.
Yeah.
But no. So he drove it. And I kept getting texts. It stayed with him for like 3 weeks until I could get back down there. And he's like, yeah, I really like it. And I was like, yeah, treat it like it's your own. And he's like, okay. And he's like, what does that mean? And I was like, treat it like it's your own. He's like, what? Like put different colored doors and cool design on it and stuff. I was like, yeah, let's do that. And he's like, yeah, that sounds fun. So he came up with, putting, Union Jacks on the wing and orange in the front and stripes down the
Yeah.
down the middle. So it was cool because the car looked great as a white GT2 with 700 horsepower, but nobody really cared.
It was pretty
Either
standard
way.
sort of look.
Yeah, and then he did that, and all of a sudden it broke the internet. Yeah, we had like a week-long thing with Joe Rogan, with Jay Leno, and some other folks, and Matt Farah and whatnot. And yeah, it was a fun ride. But everyone that drove that car, Joe was like, we'd built him a 3.9 GT3 RS and a Gen 1, and he spent some time in it, and he's just like, oh man, no, that car is not for me. There's no road here that I can use it on. But I think like I said, a GT2, you got to, people that own them know it, and they you need to spend like 3 weeks with it, like every day, and then you start to kind of get a feel for it. You can't just go into a dealership or and say, oh, let me try this GT2, and you're like, it doesn't do anything for me, because it won't. It really won't.
Yeah, you need to get used to it. I love the idea of having a Porsche, whether it's an old one or a new one, but with like serious kind of turbo lag. Like slightly dangerous levels of turbo lag. And then when it comes in, there's consequences. Just as like a fun thing. Now, obviously, I have an F40 that is kind of loony like that, but the value is very, very
it's
crazy.
Too great. That's probably not a good one to modify.
To just turn up the boost on and be like, it could get interesting.
Just stick in one of those turbo timers with a boost knob on it.
Yeah.
And just crank it up
just
to
keep cranking until it sets on fire.
Keep going until it smokes a bit, then you can stop. I experimented with that on the 996 turbo platform. The big lag is when you go single turbo. Yeah. And I had a bunch of friends that had, like Mark IV Supras. You know what those are? Back in the, I guess, Fast and the Furious
or something. Yeah.
They'd have like one big massive turbo, and it's like nothing until like 5,000 RPMs, and then yeah. I think some of them were so laggy that you needed to spray nitrous just to get them to spool.
Oh, nice.
I can see that being. I've
driven the revs start to drop.
yes. Yeah, and then the power band is like 5,000 to like 6. It's like done. It's funny. You say that, and you're right. It is fun, but in a dangerous way. But in a rear engine Porsche, lag is really a lot harder to manage, I think, because on the one hand, you've got the traction. So when it does kick in, you've got the rear engine and, the rear tire and rear fat tire, and it'll hook. But it's a lot easier to correct lag in, a mid-end, well, maybe not a mid-engine is always balanced, but in a front engine rear wheel drive car, it's the dynamics are like, just let off the gas and whatever, and sort it out. Yeah, exactly. But in an 800 horsepower, like even 996 turbo with all-wheel drive, and at the time, going back to like 2006, we were definitely, one of the things we were creating was lag, not just before, which, as I said, making more power evolved as we got older and more knowledgeable. And you're like, 800 horsepower. And then you're like, well, what about below 5,000? Because there's really nothing there. So it was like that. You'd be, you push the gas and it would be like, here it comes. And then, then lights are flashing all over the dash, And,
things are coming at you a lot faster.
But lag is a real enemy, I think, and that's what we did with the GT2. Even though we added, we went from low 500s to high 700s. We actually kept the variable vane style turbo and did like a hybrid wheel inside so that the lag would be reduced, and it wasn't as simple as just a special turbo. We had to do some things with the engine. So we found that the intake manifold on a GT2, even though it's looks fancy, and it looks better, it actually isn't, and it's flowed for specifically that amount of horsepower. And if you add more horsepower to it, it just chokes. So we went to a 997. We would swap it with a 997 turbo manifold. That was what we do with those builds. And then a different throttle body, and then different. There were like some hoses and things that were choked, that were feeding the turbos, the factory ones. So we made some, and like I said, intercoolers and all these things to help with spool. So at the end of it, like when you would get on the gas, I think we measured it. And I could be wrong, but I think like it spooled up about 100 RPMs, 150 RPMs sooner than actually in stock. And that's because of the reduction in back pressure, even though we had big turbos. So it made it better because then you had like a mass amount of power down low, and peak torque was sooner, and then the trick was trying to not make it drop off like a cliff. So and heat and managing all that. And then you still ran out of RPM because it'd be over.
Next gear, start again.
Next gear. Next gear. It was like this. It was like next gear, brake traction. Okay, down again. Next gear, brake traction. Oops. Correct a little bit. Why am I not going as fast as I want?
Why am I still stationary and I'm in fourth?
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things I want to ask you is what the engines are like. So your 3.9 and 4.1, and how the driving experience changes from those different engines, maybe starting with like, let's say my car, 3.8. I know 3.9 was on an earlier engine to start with, but...
Yeah. Well, I'll probably change it a little bit I'll start with a 3.6 and then go to a 3.8. But so a 3.6 has lighter pistons and it revs more freely than a 3.8. And how they countered that was they made the flywheel lighter in the 3.8, even on the dual mass non-RS. They made it lighter. So the 3.6 is a very rev happy engine. And when we did a 3.9, what we wanted to do was basically, get a little bit more torque with the displacement, down low, but keep that same character of the engine. So, the curve looks kind of very similar up until it gets to about six grand, where it's cammed differently and it starts to really fall off, right?
Yeah.
And ours, instead of falling off, it just flattens, and it goes from like, I think from 77 to 8800, where it's basically flat. It loses like 5 horsepower, which that's kind of like a special deal with the 3.9 engine, where it's like it just goes and pulls and pulls. And so that's why it works well on the track as well. People really like that. And when people have, whatever, freeway drag race, whatever you want to call it, against a 4.0, it's like the 3.9 just pips ahead of it because it doesn't have that drop off.
Just at the end,
some cool, cool cam profiles and some other things and tricks and whatnot. But so that engine, the 3.9, feels like a extension of that. And a lot of journalists that are picky in a good way. I'm all for picky journalists. I like they've helped us tremendously over the years. I've never. I mean, it's really cool that they say nice things, but it's also cool that we show them stuff before it's ready, and they've always helped us too. It's just it's a continuation, right? So, or extension of what the 3.6 is. And so I think that's why the 3.9 works really well on those cars. And it's like if you've put 50,000-60,000 miles on it, or 100, and you need a rebuild, you can rebuild it for almost the same, a little bit more, but have a 3.9, and it will be returned to you like. The way I describe it is, if you've driven a 997 GT3 and that's what you've owned, you've now got an RS. Like it'll just feel more alive, and it'll pull more and it'll but it'll still feel like the same factory-ass car.
Just a better version of the same.
I mean, it's got more expensive parts. It's got bigger bore, kind of more exciting cam and sound and lighter flywheel and all that kind of good stuff and tuning. The 4.1 on a 3.8 is not quite like that. It's, I think, like there were a couple of covers where it was like GT2 torque within a GT3 motor.
Yeah.
Right. So it hits, hard. I wouldn't describe it like, I mean, I think Jay Leno's like, oh, it feels like, I can't do his voice, but it feels like, in the video, he's like, he's driving it, in LA, he's driving this one. And he's like, yeah, it feels like my Carrera GT engine, but in a 911, because it's very lively, and it's very, it's got similar torque actually, but I don't think it revs quite like that. That's that engine, CGT engine's like a different hemisphere for me. It hits hard down low, which you're not used to in a GT3. Like a GT3, you're a factory GT3 engine in a 996, 997. You're not really gonna give two hoots what it's doing at 2 or 3 or even 4,000. Everything is 5 and above.
Yeah, 5 up. Yeah,
but with the torque that you get on a 4.1, it's like you do get a little bit of that turbo sensation. I don't know if it's GT2 but like the journalists say, but it's definitely torque. It's like, it's punchy. It's really punchy, and then it kind of goes away into the GT3 land, and it's still you still have a difference in torque there, but it's much quicker in terms of how it revs and responds, and so and the noises are still all there, just amplified. And a few tricks we have for both of these engines, where we use a different oil pump and things like that get rid of some of the graininess. There's a little bit of graininess to, like, especially, I would say, especially like in the 3.8 engine. It's some of it's because it's a flywheel, and some of it's the oil pump and different things like that. But it just smoothens it out. So like if you really got down into the curve, you'd see like the 3.8 would be a little bit like that, and ours is just really linear. So and you would get from point A to point B quite a bit quicker, definitely, in any gear. And if you have a worn out LSD, you'll be going nowhere very fast. You'll be going sideways. So we always upgrade the LSD when we do that, because it's not going to last or work. So the 4.1 is like a torquey, exotic engine still, but it does change the character a little bit of what you're used to. And unlike the 3.9 engine, which we rev past, like the stock red line was 84, we went to 88. On the 4.1s, we still cap it at 86. That's 100 RPM. There's no reason. Like, I find a 3.9, I usually ring out a lot more. A 4.1, I'm going so bloody fast off of that initial burst that it's not as bad as in a turbo car where I'm like, ooh, but it's like I'm going really quickly, and I sometimes, I don't need to go to 85, I'll just, I'm doing triple digits, which is another reason why I brought the gears down.
There are some cars where you sort of you're like, I just want to hear that final bit where the engine note sort of hardens, but then you sort of realize that you're almost looking at the dash, and you look back up and you're like, okay, no, it's time to slow down now.
Exactly. Like, why am I over here in fifth? Oh man. That's not good. I shouldn't be grabbing that right now. In fact, they should just lock those gears out. Totally.
License saving locks.
Yeah, exactly. Just have like an extra key you got to put in. Yeah, I know.
Have you done some work on the 718 GT4?
We've started to, and there isn't. It's not an easier path as the previous one. We do have the gearing available and the LSD, which I think are really important to those cars, and a lightweight flywheel.
Yeah.
But with how the newer cars are being set up for emissions and different equipment, it's going to be really hard to do those things in a way that A is good for the environment, and B, that's going to sound good anyway. So I think it's not that I'm saying the good days are over as far as for modifying cars, but they're becoming. I mean, Porsche is just making faster and faster cars to the point where what the hell else can you do? I mean, 718 out of the box. If you do the gearing, they'll never. They're like a turbo car in that, because of this new equipment, they'll never sound that great. Like if you want a GT4 and you want it to sound good, just get a 981 GT4.
Yeah.
That's going to sound good. But if you want to go fast and you want the newest and latest, then okay, get a 718. But it's going to be harder to do things. I mean, everything's moving, towards electric, and I think, these cars they're going to be loved and kept on the road, I assume, like sort of like a propeller plane, and like the 964 or like an old 911,
wheeled out every now and then.
Yeah, for weekends and, and fun stuff on the track, and, we'll be wearing fedoras and a pipe and pretty soon.
Yeah, they're
talking about
old guys
talking about
old Porsches.
Talking about the drives we had in 2000 and whatever. Yeah.
Back when the Autobahn was de-restricted.
Yeah, exactly. Back when, exactly. And what were they thinking with those Centrelock wheels? And exactly.
Man, Centrelock wheels, like bane of my life.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, I don't really understand why they did that, to be honest. I don't know. I think if you ask a technical person, they'll say it's because it's lighter by not really a pound.
Someone somewhere at a track day was like, yeah, but you can use a gun and take it off. And you're like, yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? A race car has air jacks too. They just goes whoop, like that. There are so many horror stories of people doing the Centerlocks wrong.
Yes.
So if there's one thing, make sure. I don't care. Well, I do care what people torque it down to. You need like a huge wrench, and you need someone to sit in the car with a foot on the brake. Yeah, right. That's really, really important. But the most important thing is that lock itself is engaged. Yeah, like push it and make sure it comes all the way out. And there's tools or whatever you need, a toothpick, whatever the hell, make it come out, because that thing will fly off.
So the people that are listening and not seeing the gestures we've just been doing, essentially we've just been poking. But if you have a Centrelock car and you don't know, or if you're not aware of the situation, essentially when you take off the little cap, there's a bit that sort of pushes in and comes back out, like it's sort of sprung. And ideally get someone to show you or whatever, but you can either just poke it and it will pop back out, but it's not locked until it's come back out. And I've been to a couple of places that have changed tires on cars, and I've only noticed it on mine, but presumably every single other one and every 911 turbo that's got Centerlocks and whatever that's done by these people before then. First of all, you need a torque wrench from a truck. So I have one of those in my garage in case someone needs to borrow it. And you go in and they will do that. You say, okay, I want it at 500 or 550 Newton meters. That's just what I say. And then they do it. And then
yeah, foot pounds, I hope.
And then you go, and then you take this off and have a look and check every single wheel, because chances are the person that doing it, if it's not Porsche, one, you're meant to grease them now as well, but
good point.
They won't check that it comes out. And if it hasn't come out, those wheels can just come off or loosen and then come off. And they do.
They do, and they have. And it's really, really bad to try driving one on three wheels. So
yeah, because they
had that experience, but I've seen it.
I think wheels come off at a time when they're really critical.
Yes.
Like it's not when you're just pulling away from a traffic light in a straight line. It's going around a corner or slamming on the brakes or accelerating hard around a corner.
The wheel turn that way. Yeah.
And then you're going to hit solid objects. But yeah, that's something.
Hopefully, when you don't have coolant on the back tires as well, to make it. Yeah, hopefully, yeah. No,
you might end up with a situation. The coolant comes out, then your diff's done anyway, so you've just got one tire spinning, and then it might just come off.
Well, yeah, that'd be pretty. Yeah, but maybe your pressure plate will explode from improper downshifting anyway. So,
yeah.
You'll be okay. It just seize up, and the weight transfer will just go forwards anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. It's all just going to explode. The first time I drove an RS, which was on this day when I drove all the 997s, I had a really hard time changing from like second to third or third to second, because I kept just hitting the gate, and I'd not driven anything like that remotely before, and now I'm used to it. And I always, whenever someone gets in my car and drive it or whatever, you're just like, okay, just be aware that it's weird, and I'm not going to judge you. It's odd. But I remember driving around the Porsche Experience Center and just like hitting this gate every time. I was like, why can I? And I'm just like, can't change into gear.
It's really funny. I've told people too this. If you just because, 2 and 3 are there, you don't draw a straight line, right? You don't just, there is no straight line there. There is a dog leg or whatever you want to call it. So just remember that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Let it go to the middle.
Let it go.
Release.
And then down.
And then go forward or whatever.
Yeah, or back, forwards or back. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. On 4 wheels, tightly locked. There's a few tips, for I found, as I'm getting older, and the second and third generation of people are buying, these cars because they're still so valuable, and people are like, oh, I want a car from that era. I had a poster of it, and now I work at Facebook, and I have 100-car collection, so I want one of those. And they're like, oh, the clutch is heavy, or they're the lightweight flywheels, but there's actually inbuilt features that people don't really know about. It doesn't say this in the manual, but like in those cars, if you're in traffic, or you can actually not touch the gas or the accelerator pedal, and move forwards and backwards just easily. Just raise the clutch up, and you can put it in first or reverse, and it'll move forwards or backwards. It's like a nice. That's what people do in CGTs to keep their clutches lasting. So
don't use the throttle.
No, not in that one. Definitely not. I think part of the fun of it, though, it's like learning to play a difficult instrument, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's got a lot of, it's got a heavy pedal that some people would think, and it's got a notchy gearbox, and it revs like really quickly, and it's a timing, musical instrument that when you learn, and nobody ever really truly masters it except certain race car drivers, but if you get 7 out of 10 is good enough, right? If you get the perfect heel toe and downshift, and it's all smooth, and there's no movement back and forth, and you're like, oh yeah, great. Whereas the newer cars are all way faster and easier to drive, and that's what I was getting at with the GT4. It's easier to drive something like that fast versus that. That takes a long time to kind of get used to and master, and you probably don't want to lend that to just anyone, because but a GT4 is really easy to drive, actually.
Yeah, super easy. I really appreciate the differences between the generations, and I have an SC that's been backdated and messed with and whatever. So that has the 915 gearbox, I think, which is, it's like driving a lorry or something. For the first 6 months, I was like, oh, can we just put a G50 gearbox in this? Everyone tells me that's much better, blah, 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 blah. And then I started, the more I drove the car, the more I got used to it. And I started to appreciate the fact that it's a bit hard, and like you really have to get it right. You have to learn it. Yes. And like it's all this sort of process. And then now there's no way I would change it, because it's part of driving that car, and I accept that it's old and whatever. Likewise, I think 997 seems like RS seems really quite raw now, not versus like really old cars, but it kind of feels pretty raw. And I would quite like something that's either, I would love a 991 GT3 maybe, or even a 992 just like Carrera, or something of the much more modern, like fast forward 15 years or 10 years or whatever it is, and have that comfort, and probably even have it as an auto, and just be like, appreciate the different generations.
That's the point. They've gone so, I agree. And, I had the first PDK car they had in 09, which was 08 here. What did they call it? It was a Carrera S. It was a launch car, and it was it was Porsche Racing Green. And I was like, that's a strange color.
What color is
that? It had like an old man brown interior, but I was like, I'll take it. It's the first one in California. I'll have it, and I'll develop on it. And, it was, I knew that as soon as that happened, I was like, I see what they've done. They've taken the old Tiptronic, and they've made it available to everybody. The Tiptronic was horrible by comparison, and they've brought that up, but they've also expanded the ability for everybody to buy it and feel comfortable with it. And I was kind of sad, because I was like, well, we won't be the cool kids anymore, or the weird kids anymore with a 911. It'll be everyone now. But they got to sell more cars, and and truthfully, if you're into going fast around a track, and you care about times, and PDK is
Paddles. Yeah.
what people use. I'm an older, grumpier driver that likes, the experience of it and the feel of it and sort of playing a musical instrument and going on beautiful canyon roads. And I'm not going 10/10ths anyway. So, I don't need a fraction of a second for a shift. I'm quite happy to, move half of my body to do it, because in a PDK car, I'm just bored, doing the driving I do. And there'll probably be lots of people. Well, there are lots of people that will never have a manual gearbox because they'll look at it and go, "Why would I do that? It's like slow, stupid, cumbersome." And I get it.
I totally get it.
Do. Yeah.
Like there's a space for all of these, and I love that Porsche are still making manual gearboxes. They're still making these things out there.
They took it away and then they brought it back again.
Yeah,
very
cunning plan. I don't like you said how the GT3s, for example, it used to be this sort of hidden thing. Not massively, but no one really would buy the GT3 because why would you buy a GT3? And now every damn person wants a bloody GT3 and you can't buy them.
Yes, it's really, for the purist in that way, it got kind of different. But, that
it's fine.
From that standpoint, we can go play with the older ones or whatever, I mean, of the newer cars, the problem with the PDK is going to be that the level of performance is going to change so much once it's all down to computers now that, you said, with your F40, but I mean, I remember going back to the early 2000s and driving a bunch of the Ferraris that went from manual to flappy paddles, as they were called. For example, have you ever driven a Stradale?
No.
360 Modena Stradale. Okay, drive that, and at the time in whatever 2004, you're like, oh wow, this is great, but it feels terrible compared to I don't know,
anything. What's the F8? But it feels
Formaggio
terrible.
edition or whatever. Yeah, yeah, that one. But it shifts compared to this one that's like the Stradale. So I think it starts to feel and look older, and especially if you're not using half your body. I mean, with PDK, what do you do with your left foot and your right arm? Really? Okay, I guess you could do that, but or whatever it is. Yeah, but
on the McLaren,
it just feels disconnected.
You don't even need to use both hands because on one paddle you can go up or down.
Down, yeah, exactly. Well, and ask a bunch of fast guys at the track, with their 0.2 GT3 RSs. I mean, a lot of the time, you're not even using the paddles. When you're using the paddles, you're screwing up the programming.
Yeah.
It's like you're, I don't know. Yeah, they're so intelligent, and they're so fast. And it's, it's I know it's evolution and stuff, but still.
It's an interesting one, that one, because I think as soon as, a bit like electric, once everything's gone electric, I don't think we're going to have vintage electric. I don't see that ever being a thing because it's just going to be empirically worse. And I don't think that's better. And I think those sorts of gearbox, double clutch gearbox, occasionally a single clutch is a different experience and you sort of have to learn it and whatever. But when it's a double clutch, you just have the latest, greatest is the best one. And why would you drive the older one? There's just no reason why you would do that.
No, it's slower doing the same thing. I've bought many 911s and Porsches that I've had the intention, since 2000 till, now, that are like, oh, this will be my daily driver. This will be my daily driver. And as traffic has gotten worse, and as at least where we are in California and in the Bay Area, where a drive that was 20 minutes, now takes, 15 years later, takes an hour and a half, doing the same 20-mile drive. And it's not a fun drive. So, electric cars in those instances are way better. I mean, it's quieter, it's seamless, and good luck to them with the Taycan.
It's just the future for that sort of transport. And absolutely, my daily in 10 years' time will be some sort of automatic, electric, blah, 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 whatever. And even if I'm possibly looking at buying another car at the moment to be a sort of like a nice daily-ish type car. And that, if it was a Porsche, I need to stop myself buying another Porsche. Otherwise I've got too many Porsches, but it would be PDK. Absolutely be PDK. And if it's someone else, it's either whatever their version of the same system is, because around town, like, there's just no, like, it's not that fun.
And it gets beyond that. Like I was telling you, that '09 PDK when traffic was getting bad. I was like, I get it. This is a good daily driver and it's a good place to be. But then, you sort of need something beyond that, like a Tesla with, the automatic cruise control.
Yeah.
So that you're
That's
stopping,
so
starting, stopping, starting, stopping, starting, and it does it for you. And then you can, have your meeting at the same time, not drive, and then just be self-driving. Exactly. I used to always want my Porsches to be, I could take it anywhere, be a Swiss Army knife. I could go to the track, I could go to this, but traffic has gotten so much worse. And, the electric cars have gotten so good that, if you're just doing a commuting transport situation, then why burn so much gas and make so much smell and noise when you're only going 5 to 10 miles an hour anyway? I mean, you're not doing anything with it. It's such a waste.
And burning your clutch and like all the stuff. And as much as I love the idea, and I've never quite agreed with this one of a couple of my friends, or one particular, it's like, I would like to have a race car on the road. I'm like, no, I've driven race cars and they don't belong on the road. But I used to be, back when I was like, oh, I love really, really loud cars. And I do like it a little bit. You'd be like, I want to drive a really hardcore car every single day. And the reality of that is rubbish. Like, it's just, there's a reason people don't do it.
Do you want to commute like down Park Lane every morning in an F40?
No.
LM? No. No, exactly.
Like, I took my GT3 out today. I had to go to the post office to do some stuff. So it's like a 15-minute drive just through London. And it's cold at the moment. So I don't know, 6 degrees C or something like that. And the gearbox hadn't warmed up by the time I got to the post office, at which point changing into second is like a bit horrible. And you're like, this is bad for the car. I'm not really enjoying this that much because I can't really change gear that much. And you're like, oh man, but this is going to have to be, it's going to be weekends and track days and whatever.
That's what I was going to ask you, because, I didn't own Porsches. I left London in '98, so I didn't have a car then. I was finishing being a student at the LSE, but so I don't know the scene there well, but where I've lived, whether it's been LA or the Bay Area in California, the traffic's terrible, but I can drive 15, 20 minutes and then I'm at a canyon road. But I don't know what's the scene like in London for, can you just drive somewhere and get an escape or what?
It takes quite a long time. It takes quite a long time. It's quite annoying. I've been recently during this sort of lockdown period and whatever.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of people lending me cars. And I've been doing a video and then some stuff for the podcast and things like that. And I'm trying to work out what's the shortest distance I can drive to get to a decent bunch of roads. And the answer is about 50 minutes, like an hour, really. And even then it's like, it's okay. And like southeast where London is, it's so population dense that the big good bits of road you get are only 5 minutes in between two towns or villages or whatever. It's not, you don't get just let loose for an hour.
That's why you see why, someone like, a company like Tesla and the electric cars are so, put most people in that situation, they're going to want a car like that. I mean, by the time you get to your destination and can open it up. But I mean, London in the 80s and 90s, I don't remember being, traffic free either.
Yeah.
So,
well, I normally wrap these up with 5 questions.
All right.
Do you have a most memorable driving trip or journey?
Oof. I've had a lot, actually. I've got to experience a lot of, weird, fun, different people in it. But as far as exhilarating, probably we filmed a TV show for, here it's the Speed Channel. I think it might be, I don't know what it is in the UK, but we filmed a TV show with our 3.9 green GT3 RS. And they closed down, this was I think in 2009 or 2010, they closed down a top secret Air Force base with U-2 spy planes. You know what those big black.
Yeah.
Yeah, those big with the huge wings, and they barely take off, and they're like, fly at whatever allegedly
Crazy high,
100,000
yeah.
feet, and take pictures, and yeah, um, and then those Global Hawk, drones.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think that might have not helped the case at the time to find you know terrorists or whatever they were trying to do. But anyways, we shut this down so we could film a TV show where we had a famous IndyCar driver, Paul Tracy, and then Tanner Faust, who's like a famous drifter, car
Yep.
guy, Porsche ambassador or whatever. And he was driving my car, and then Paul Tracy was driving a Ferrari modified, and there was like a shootout thing over the course of 3 days and events. A little bit cheesy, but whatever. But the cool thing is that the winner got to help for like an afternoon of like using their car to like help a U-2 spy plane land. It's kind of weird.
Cool.
So I got this footage. I got footage of my car with the race exhaust on it. With bright green. You know, like landing. On TV landing. These U-2 planes and stuff.
That's
so it was
cool.
it was pretty weird. And it's like the guy in the car with you is like, okay, don't get too close. No, really, because how much do you like the green paint? I'm like, I like it a lot because it really will blow the paint off it.
Right.
We've done this with our usually they use like V8, GM cars for it, right? That they get given because they're, part of the, So that was a pretty strange thing to do, and definitely like, why are we here?
That's pretty cool.
And then, in that blue car, going for a drive with Jay Leno, and
it's quite surreal.
Him. Yeah, it was weird. Bright blue car with a huge wing and orange wheels in the middle of the day in LA, and everyone's like, what the yeah. And then just, someone with spending a few days there with him and, seeing like the best car collection I've ever seen in my life. I don't even need to go to a museum anymore. I'm done there. And having someone that's driven so many different cars and got such a wide range of thoughts and experiences to drive it and drive it quickly, and then sort of go what he liked and how he liked it and why we did it, and take an interest. And I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. Definitely. Yeah, so that was probably a memorable one.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. Right, next question. 5-car garage, unlimited value.
Carrera GT. I'd have a 3.8 RS or 4.0 RS like that. I'd have a 964, probably I'd probably have an RS because I'm I'd want it to be an RS, and I'd still modify it anyway. Yeah. So what's that? We're at
3.
To 3. Probably have a F40 actually.
Nice.
Yeah. I probably would. I probably would just cause.
Yeah.
I could put a Porsche badge on it.
You could.
I don't care. But yeah. If it was only 5 and there's only 5 vehicles, I'd have to have like a badass electric car that I could go anywhere. So whatever the new Roadster Tesla thing, I guess, whatever that is, probably have one of those.
I think that's a good bunch. If you can only drive one car for the rest of your life, and you're allowed like a £500 banger, so you 4.1 GT3 RS tick.
Yeah, it's just I've had so many weird experiences with it, and it's just like the sound and the feel of that instrument is just puts a smile. So yeah, that one. It does. You own one, right? And it doesn't have to be a 4.1. That's what I was saying. I mean, it's special to me because of that. But for pure driving, like a GT3 RS 997.1 or 0.2, there's just nothing else that plays like that music, and doesn't connect the same way. There isn't another car from that era. I don't think there's one before, and there certainly isn't one after.
And the only thing I wish I would change about my RS, there's a few things. I would upgrade the speakers, because there's times when I'm like fully maxed going down the motorway and I can't hear shit. But I drove a 4 litre and I was like, I would quite like that torque. That's And I guess it's the gearing as well. That's probably part of it. But
the gearing is a sneaky one.
That is a sneaky one. And then that's it. And then I'd be like set for life. But I sort of lucked out when I bought that car of it just so happened to be that was the car I really wanted at the time. And that's what I bought and that's what I could afford. But I've not driven any car since that I get out of it and go, you know what, I would swap this car. You might go, oh, I would have that as well or whatever. It's just such an amazing starting point for comparing to any other car. And other cars will do, more modern cars, more modern GT3s or whatever, will do stuff better, like faster and more capable and whatever. But that package and the way the steering and everything works, and just the way, like you said, you can play the engine. Lots of other cars make great engines, but they don't have that change in sounds and feel when you put the throttle down. It's just like a noise that gets louder, or it is quite unique in that aspect. Right. Most undervalued car at the moment. What do you think is the most undervalued car at the moment?
One of the best cars I've had that got no respect, but was really good for the time was like a 2011 of RS. I thought the
really
suspension was, I thought the suspension was magical. It was the most poised thing ever. You know, it was just a set of Bilsteins with Lotus chassis. It made some tremendous sounds with a little bit of modification. And it had an absolutely terrible gearbox, just the worst I've ever, that let it down and probably why nobody wanted to buy them. But once you fixed that, it was good. So I thought that was a really crazy car for the time. And actually, dare I say it, you know, I had it at the same time still as my GT4. You know, it made me smile more than the GT4. It felt more, you know, like, I don't know, it just felt more visceral. So I think that's the most undervalued. And then probably that one back there, 996 GT3 in the Porsche world.
Yeah.
Like, I love that. I love hearing, oh, I just hate the lights. I just hate the lights. I just can't deal with the lights. All right.
Yeah, okay.
Don't deal with the lights then.
Fine.
They're really important. Really important when driving. They are very important for nighttime driving. So yes, you want to have xenon, LED, or whatever. Yeah. But beyond that, I must say, when I'm sitting behind the wheel and driving those cars, the lights are the last thing I think about. So
yeah, and it's the cheapest way into that group of cars now. And
it's really strange because like Porsches have gone up in value tremendously, you know, like all the older ones.
Yeah. And
that one, I don't know if it ever will. You know,
I think it will. I think it'll get dragged up.
Of them. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. But there's so few of them, right?
Yeah. There's not a lot. So. Right. Last question. What is the most interesting car to you at the moment?
I want to at some point go back and really focus on the 996 GT3s again. Like we this is after we sort of gone where we're going to go with the 964s.
Yeah.
And I think we got it to a level where it's just, you know, it's like it's closer to, it's related to that, you know, it's somewhere related to that and the 996 GT3. Yeah. So we got it to that level. But I want to probably go back on the 996 GT3 and see what kind of a scary. I'm waiting for someone to say I want to do a 4.1 on one again, because there were people before that wanted to do it, and I think, you know, it would be kind of fun to take one with, you know, like 120,000 miles on it or whatever, that needs an engine refresh, and instead of doing the 3.9, just going with a 4.1. And, you know, I'd probably just keep the stock wheels, keep everything. I'd have to put Cup 2s on it, obviously, but and just see how mental that thing would be, you know. Probably have to do you know what we'll have to do with we'll have to do like the, you know, turning the tack this way too, like in the air-cooled cars. I'll have to do that too. I want to do that. That's the only thing I want to do with it. Just do that.
Someone gets in and is like, what's going on here?
Yeah, we couldn't make one, so we had to turn this one.
Thanks very much for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thanks, man. It's been really fun. Good. It's been fun talking to someone back from home with a blue, you know,
blue GT3,
RS 3.8. Yeah, exactly. There's not many of us.
No, so we're a rare breed.
People are probably like, why do they like that car so much? Well, check out some videos and whatnot, you know, and see, and try and drive them. I say, because
I have to say,
they'll be gone soon.
Yeah, with the SharkWerks bypass on my car, so a bypass system, loads of people make a bypass system. I've had other people I know have done different exhaust systems on their car. A couple of people have done full Akrapovic, or however you say it, and I would say my car with a bypass is as loud or louder and sounds better to me than a full Akrapovic system. And they're like, yeah, but it's a full system. It's going to be blown. You're like, okay, but just put them next to each other, and I guarantee you, mine's either louder or the same. So I don't know why you're messing around changing half the stuff on the car. You do lose a bit of weight.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like we only make exhausts for the cars that we own.
Yeah.
Like I won't make an exhaust for anything that I don't own, and that's not. I mean, Akrapovic
probably not that profitable.
Really nice stuff. Akrapovic. Sorry. Oh, God, yeah. Okay, it's the American in me, not Akrapovic.
I don't know how you say it. Akrapovic.
Yeah, I don't know how you say it. But they make fantastic, looking stuff, and it's high quality. And I've installed it before and handled it before. Great stuff. But I would just say that, like on the cars that we focus on, that's all we do. And, we probably did, I don't even remember how many different designs, and because there's so many different ways to do a bypass and remove that third muffler, and everyone's, sort of taken what we've done and changed it or just copied it.
Yeah.
And Akrapovic actually, after many years, sells a part that looks a lot like ours now, finally. So, because it does, I mean, there's a reason why. I mean, if we need to make something more complicated, we will, there's a reason why we keep the diameter the same, and as the stock, we don't try and induce more drone, with bigger pipes and things. And no, I mean, we've done, it's been fun, actually. That's one of the fun parts of the job is, sending out something that's relatively compact and simple. And, I mean, there are people in Colombia, Chile, Jamaica, obviously London, and, in Russia, in China, in Hong Kong, that have it. And it's been kind of fun to, get video clips of someone acting like a hooligan, or just on the track, or just revving or starting it up, in all parts of the world. So,
it's cool. It's very cool.
It's fun. It's fun. All right, man.
Thanks very much.